Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blind Buys, a brand new podcast where we watch and discuss movies we've bought sight unseen. I'm Josh, and with me, as always, is my collector in crime, Jesse.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our third episode where we'll be discussing Josh's blind buy pick, Wild at Heart. And as an extra bonus, we will also be discussing the David Lynch mystery DVD, the David Lynch mystery disc, included on a strange box set for David Lynch, released some years ago. And Josh doesn't even know what's contained on this disc. So we will be revealing live the contents of the mystery disc. Is it a portal to the Black Lodge? Is it an hour-long video of David Lynch eating hamburgers at a Big Boy? All will be revealed at the bottom of the hour.
I would be perfectly fine with either of those, to be quite honest with you. Yeah, I heard tell about this disc for many years now, so I'm excited to get into it. But yeah, before we get into that, here at the top of the hour, this is where we typically discuss what we've been watching lately. So, Jesse, what have you been up to? What have you been watching?
Well, I managed to get out to the theater just once, but it was a really good time out. I caught up with 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple.
Nice.
And I really loved it. I was a huge fan of the original 28 Days Later, of course, is great. But I saw 28 Years Later when it came out and also in the theater, and was just, I think, primed to really like it because I've enjoyed so much of Danny Boyle's work and Alex Garland's writing. But I really didn't know what to expect going into 28 Years Later. And so was just really kind of blown away with what they did with that movie, just in terms of the story it starts out as and the story it sort of morphs into in the second half, and the way it was shot, the performances. I mean, Ralph Fiennes was so great, and the kid that they got to play the main character who we follow through both of these movies is really, really wonderful. I mean, I think they found, I don't know if that was his debut or not, but he carries these movies. Less so the second one. The second one is kind of more Ralph Fiennes' movie a little bit. But The Bone Temple is just kind of showing what to do with franchises, like franchise reboots. And it's exciting. It's moving in some very strange and unexpected ways. Nia DaCosta directed this one. And yeah, she's great. I mean, I've kind of loved everything I've seen from her so far. I need to go back and see her Candyman remake. She's just so good. So I hope that this kind of gets her a blank check to do whatever she wants next, and that we get this last 28 Years movie.
I'm really hoping to see that as soon as I can. I've seen both of Nia DaCosta's kind of bigger studio movies in theaters. I saw Candyman when that came out, and I saw her Marvel effort, The Marvels, in theaters as well. And I thought that The Marvels was one of the better movies of that period, and it was like able to kind of tie in the TV stuff without relying too heavily on like having prior knowledge of what went on the TV side. So I know she got a lot of flack for that film from like the true fans or whatever, but I had a really good time with that, and I think she is definitely a director to look out for in the future.
Yeah, I'd recommend Little Woods, which I think was also it might have been her feature debut. That was the first I saw that. I rented that. I think that was a DVD rental for me at the time. And what else to do? Look at this. It was 2 days in a row I made it to a theater. I saw Zootopia 2 with my son. I took my son to see Zootopia 2. Had a lot of fun. I haven't seen the first Zootopia. Zootopia 2 was pretty good. I think it's now like the highest grossing animated film of all time or something like that. It's pretty funny. If you're a cinephile, there's a lot of surprising homages to all kinds of things, including The Shining. Which made me laugh. Yeah. Oh yeah. So keep your eyes peeled. I'm sure that will be on Disney Plus before we know it.
The first Zootopia has a lot of elements of like film noir and like police procedurals and 70s like buddy cop movies and that kind of thing. So I was wondering how much the second film was gonna try to like lean into those genres a bit more. I'm gonna have to check it out when it hits Disney Plus though.
Yeah, a lot of fun. I also dug into another blind buy, not for the show, but just picked it up off the stack. I watched Descendant of the Sun, which was a Vinegar Syndrome archive release of a Shaw Brothers film. And this is from the period where the Shaw Brothers studio started getting into they had kind of been doing pretty traditional martial arts films up to like the mid 70s. But then when, Star Wars hit and some other genre movies made it big in the States, they started cashing in on like fantasy films and things. And this is basically a Superman ripoff, but set in like ancient China. And it is just, yeah, it's just totally bonkers. The stuff they do with the effects toward the end, like with these like people shooting lasers out of their eyes and fingers, people getting turned into crabs, some just really wacky wire work. The last half hour is just like a complete sort of tour de force of effects and people jumping off of trampolines and bursting out of walls and stuff. It was loads of fun. And I watched one of the features on it where Sam Deegan did a visual essay on Shaw Brothers in the late 70s and 80s, and they're sort of leaning into fantasy. And I just started listing movies that were mentioned or featured in that essay, and many of them were in the Arrow Shawscope Volume 4, and I didn't end up picking it up in the sale that just happened with Barnes and Noble because it was like I want to see most of these movies, and these are just so much fun. So that was another highlight. Yeah. And lastly, just yesterday I watched this movie called Grace of My Heart, which was an Allison Anders movie from 1996 starring Ileana Douglas, and it's sort of like a loose, not a biopic of Carole King, but sort of inspired by her arc in her life of being a songwriter in the Brill Building, working on like writing hits for lots of artists, and then growing into an artist on her own. So that was a Scarecrow rental, and I had a great time with it. It's sort of like this independent movie from that sort of heyday of indie films in the 90s, and it's got John Turturro wearing this sort of ridiculous goatee and just playing this sort of slick New York record producer. Eric Stoltz is in it, so it's not a 90s indie film without Eric Stoltz, right? And Matt Dillon and Ileana Douglas is just great as the lead. I mean, yeah. It's just I watched another movie where she was had a featured role in it recently, and I just kind of went on a Letterboxd rabbit hole and said, what other movies had she starred in? Because she didn't really get to do too much, it seems, in the mainstream where she was like leading a film. And I'd never heard of this movie before. And there's lots of, I mean, it's practically a musical. You get to hear a lot of the songs that they wrote for the movie in full. And that was a lot of fun. And it's actually featured in, I picked up this book, Cinema Her Way by Mariah E. Gates, which Letterboxd people might know that name. She is the originator of the Noirvember hashtag, and is just a great writer on film. And she writes primarily now for RogerEbert.com. But this book she came out, it's Cinema Her Way, Visionary Female Directors in Their Own Words. And she did extended interviews with a bunch of women who direct movies, including Allison Anders. So I've been meaning to work through more of these more movies in this book. So I need to go back and read the interview with Allison Anders now that I watched that. And I mean, I've only really scratched the surface of movies that are covered in this. And I think I might have a couple, so that would be fun to go through some for the pod. So yeah, I think that's cool. Kind of like all the big highlights for me. What have you been up to with your watches recently?
What have I been watching? To be honest, not a whole lot. In the time between last episode and this episode, my wife and I had our baby. We're spending, a lot of time keeping her alive at this point. I will say, though, the last movie that I watched before the baby was born is one called Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bowl-O-Rama. I watched this the day before my daughter was born, and it has some of the most ridiculous quotes, I think, from any movie I've ever seen. This is a movie by David Lynch, who has done several Puppet Master movies. But basically, it's about a group of frat guys who are also nerds who are trying to impress sorority girls, and so they've been tasked to steal a trophy from a local bowling alley, and inside of the trophy that they steal, there's like an imp from another world that like grants their wishes and then causes all kinds of mayhem, and it kind of turns into a slasher at the end. Just like a really great time, like a solid 3 stars and a heart. And then in the days since, I've been able to fit in The Ugly Stepsister, which was a 2025 film. This is a Danish like body horror black comedy retelling of Cinderella, and it's basically just all about the ugly stepsister going through all of the pain that it takes to make herself perfect and acceptable for the prince. And so you can imagine the body horror that kind of ensues from there. Really great stuff. Really gets like the Brothers Grimm-esque like violence of the original story down, but it's also very maximalist in its filmmaking style. It reminded me a lot of The Substance. So I had a really great time with that. Otherwise, I did a little twofer of Catherine O'Hara films. She passed away this past week, kind of out of the blue. I was kind of just like standing in the kitchen, and I got like a notification on my phone, and I just opened it, and it was Catherine O'Hara passed away at 71, and I had to like take a minute because it was such a shock to the system, because I have like lived with her movies and performances for so long, and think that I just kind of took it for granted that she would be around to do more, especially with her recent turn on The Studio, a great Apple TV Plus show. It's kind of a spoof on Hollywood. She's great in that show. You would never have known anything was going on, behind the scenes.
Yeah, that news hit me really hard also. I mean, obviously, being of my age, her, Home Alone and Beetlejuice. I mean, Beetlejuice is one of my all-time favorites, and Schitt's Creek was an absolute COVID sort of security blanket for me and my wife, catching up with and watching that. So yeah, just a singular talent, really, and someone who seemed universally beloved, and why not?
So really just shocking and extremely sad loss. So that kind of inspired me to revisit Best in Show, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And of course, Catherine O'Hara is just a comedic genius in that movie. A lot of it's improv, a lot of it's working with her castmates from Second City, directed by Christopher Guest, who also did Waiting for Guffman, which is another one of my all-time favorites. But Best in Show, kind of a mockumentary about dog handlers presenting at a dog show. Just a really great film, and it made me really sad to see her, but it was also just so great to laugh, So yeah, Best in Show, highly recommend to anyone who hasn't seen it or who loves Catherine O'Hara and wants to see more of what she has done. And then the second film that I watched in this little double feature was For Your Consideration, which is another Christopher Guest comedy film. It's not a mockumentary this time, but it's kind of a parody of Hollywood and award season. And Catherine O'Hara is, again, fantastic in it. It's definitely a lesser movie of Guests, in my opinion, but it still has its moments. Fred Willard is actually a major scene stealer in this movie, more than anyone else. So I'd recommend it for his performance alone, honestly.
My latest Scarecrow stack included The Paper, which is a film that she did with Ron Howard. She's not one of the leads, but she's like a featured player, and it's one of the biggest films I have yet to see from her, so I'm excited to check that out. And I also saw that Scarecrow has on VHS this movie called There Goes the Neighborhood, which she starred in with Jeff Daniels. It's a 1992 comedy about, it says, a dying prisoner whispers the location of his loot to the facility psychologist, who I think is maybe I don't know if Jeff Daniels is the psychologist or if Catherine O'Hara is his wife or what. But it sounds, I mean, it's the cast. You've got Jeff Daniels, Catherine O'Hara, Hector Elizondo, Rhea Perlman, Harris Yulin, Jonathan Banks, Daphne Coleman. So I was like, I have to watch this. So I think they've got the VHS, but it's also on it's on Hoopla also. So, but I like getting the VHSs from Scarecrow because I have the tape player, and I have just, as I've said before, I enjoy seeing the trailers for what else was coming out concurrently, especially for a 1992 movie that I've never heard of, from a guy who only directed one movie.
Yeah, this cast is insane. Did this never get a DVD release or anything?
I think this is VHS only currently. I'll report back on it after I watch it. There could be a very good reason why no one has picked it up, but it seems like it's only a matter of time before these like 90s comedies get mined by one of the labels. It could be like, I feel like Kino Lorber, just knowing nothing else about it, I feel like Kino picks up a lot of these to release
for sure.
On Blu-ray with a kind of a no frills, because like, who are they going to find who wants to talk about There Goes the Neighborhood from 1992. So so maybe
get Hector Elizondo on there.
Coming.
He's still around.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, we'll report back on that. And I don't know, those 90s comedies are just kind of a comfort watches for me. So even if it's not anything revolutionary, if I'm watching Jeff Daniels and Catherine O'Hara play off each other, I think I'm going to have a great time, especially now. So yeah, we'll see about that.
Speaking of Scarecrow rentals, I decided to take the plunge and start renting discs from them as well. Obviously, I'm extremely far away from where they are, but I'm trying it out. see how much that I can watch within the rental period. So they actually just got delivered to me today. I've got 4 discs that I am renting from Scarecrow. These are all movies that are in various Letterboxd challenges I'm doing this year. So we've got the movie Debs, 2005, I believe. Never seen it. Don't know hardly anything about it, so very interested to check that out. This is a DVD copy. This doesn't have a Blu-ray release at the moment. This is DVD. DVD of Debs. We've got a Shout Select Blu-ray of the movie Cuffs, starring Christian Slater. Don't know anything about this one either, so that will be an interesting first-time watch. We've got David Cronenberg's Shivers, which was a Vestron Video Blu-ray release, so I'm going to be checking that out. And then I've got the Blu-ray of the original Phantasm, which has been remastered. All first-time watches for me. All movies that I didn't feel confident enough to spend the full, like $30 on. And also movies that aren't really streaming anywhere. So that really narrowed down my picks for me for this first rental batch. So I will report back next time. Well, I think now we can talk about some physical media releases that are upcoming here in the next month or so. Vinegar Syndrome announced their February releases just a couple days ago. The titles for February 2026 include a 4K of Demon Warp, 4K of Bacterian, aka Panic, a 4K of Body of Evidence starring Madonna and Willem Dafoe. And for Vinegar Syndrome Archive, they're releasing a Blu-ray of Dead Boys Can't Fly. And then under the cinematography label, we have a 4K of Boxcar Bertha, which is Martin Scorsese's feature debut.
Yeah, some of these definitely are appealing. The Demon Warp, I'm sort of late in the game to the George Kennedy as genre film superstar thing, and the cover of this includes George Kennedy, somebody who sort of looks like a Grim Reaper holding a dagger over somebody, and then a Sasquatch monster. So that just looks fun. I at least need to watch, and it's very tempting. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Body of Evidence feels like a rental. Like, I'll rent that. Like, that's sort of a notorious 90s erotic thriller. I think that Karina Longworth had an episode devoted to that in her really can't miss erotic 90s podcast series on You Must Remember This. I think she did a whole episode on Madonna and what Madonna was up to and how she was really kind of done dirty by the movie industry because everyone had all these kind of preconceived notions about her and why she was doing movies and things. I definitely would like to see that. And I don't know, Boxcar Bertha, Scorsese debut, I think that's kind of a no-brainer from Cinematograph.
Yeah, I'm debating picking up that Boxcar Bertha release because I didn't love Boxcar Bertha the first time I watched it, but in terms of, being in the collector's mindset, I'm probably going to end up getting it at some point.
Yeah, I think that'll stick around in terms of number of copies. They print like 5,000 copies of that, so that'll probably come up in a sale. Yeah. So if you don't want to buy it full price, you're probably okay.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for them to do Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Like we're this close. I feel like they've got Boxcar Bertha. Let's do one more, and then they got me.
Yep. There's also some really notable partner label releases that were announced. This is always the fascinating grab bag because they really dive really deep to bring some stuff that I've never heard of. But in this case, IFC Films is going to be releasing Blackberry, which is nice. I really like that movie. I thought Blackberry was pretty good, surprisingly good for one of those sort of like true story of, I feel like there was a few of those. There was the Nike one, which didn't sound very good.
Yeah.
But this was actually surprisingly good when I saw it. So it's just, I don't know if I'll pick it up, but it was just nice to see that these sort of like movies that get dumped to streaming and then disappear and getting a physical release. But one that I'm definitely interested in is from American Genre Film Archive, this movie Embalmer, which I've never heard of, it's like a 90s hood horror film about like some crazy embalmer, someone who's killing people and turning their bodies into zombies or something. I don't know, but it looks pretty wild.
This caught my eye immediately when I was just browsing through the website. I mean, the cover is is very enticing. Agfa does a great job on all of their releases. But yeah, the part of the description of this one is shot on 16 millimeter film with a small budget in Washington, D.C. Embalmer utilizes a hip hop soundtrack, sly humor, and slasher mechanics to tell a deeper story of abuse, trauma, and the never ending cycle of coping with pain. That feels very heavy, but I have a feeling that this movie is probably not that heavy. From the screenshots on the website, this looks just like a blast.
Yeah, there's other good ones there, but we could talk all night about the partner label releases if we wanted to, because there's just always so many good ones each month. Severin announced some pretty interesting box sets. I mean, their box sets are just some of the best out there. I mean, from the House of Psychotic Women box sets that they do with Kayla Janice to the folk horror stuff. So their work is just always so top notch. But they've got this Antonio Margheriti and the Jungles of Doom, his 80s adventure films. It's these 3 basically Indiana Jones cash-in films that I've never heard of and just look like tons of fun. I mean, the trailer is just like basically a minute of explosions and people running through the jungle. Very
Yeah.
practical, very big looking explosions. So that's fascinating. I mean, Margheriti is like he kind of seemed to go on that similar trajectory of a lot of Italian genre filmmakers, of just jumping from one trend to another, from like spaghetti westerns to horror, and then I guess to like, jungle adventure movies. So these movies are just always loads of fun. So I'm very interested in that one.
Yeah, I have a couple of his movies already that I haven't watched, but I own Castle of Blood and Seven Deaths in the Cat's Eye, and that already runs the gamut from like gothic horror to giallo. So definitely thinking about getting this box set. It's tempting. I just don't know. I don't know if the quality of these movies is going to be what I want them to be. Not production quality. I don't, frankly, I don't care about that with these movies, but I just want to know that they're entertaining enough for me to be like, yeah, I can turn my brain off and just laugh at this or just geek out over explosions or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think they're all
that's
on
my one
Tubi.
drawback.
So yeah. Mm-hmm. You could check
Well,
one
if
out
that
and
tells you
see if it's
anything,
yeah.
then yeah.
Yes. So you could check them out, see if they're for you.
Elsewhere in physical media, we've got some releases coming out the week of February 10th that are somewhat notable. We've got the Criterion 4K upgrade of Playtime from Jacques Tati. Maybe there will be some additional Tati titles being released in 4K in the future. Maybe a 4K release of the box set that I love so much. Maybe. One can only hope. We've got a Lawrence of Arabia 4K Standard Edition coming out. The Steelbook was released not too long ago, I think towards the end of last year. So that will be hitting shelves. If I pick that one up, that'll be a blind buy for me. Never seen it. And honestly, I honestly might want to wait though to see it on the big screen, because this is one of the ones that everyone says you got to see this on the big screen, right?
Yeah, I never have. I got that 4K and I haven't watched it yet, but for sure. I mean, if you can, like, hold out. But it's an amazing movie to watch anytime any way you can see it. So, but I feel like it's one that also gets revived a lot. Like if you're anywhere, because some theater near you will play it at some point. So yeah, maybe you've got a lot of other stuff to watch. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I'll think about it. And then there are a couple of titles coming from TerraVision, which is a great smaller label that releases a lot of underseen horror movies. I got to visit their pop-up when I was in Chicago last year. Took home a couple of titles that were really great, including one called Revenge of the Radioactive Reporter, which was on 4K. Had an absolute blast watching that movie when I got back from my Chicago trip. This time they're releasing a film called Student Bodies, which is going to be a 4K title from them. This one's not going to be a blind buy for me. I watched it for Hooptober, a Halloween movie challenge a couple of years ago, and the category was a film made primarily or entirely in Texas. I picked Student Bodies because they shot it in Texas, and it's kind of like an early meta slasher. It definitely has a lot of elements of parody to it. I did feel like at the time it was a little a little janky, a lot of repeating jokes and stuff. But I had a good time with it, and I think the 4K is going to be a great release from TerraVision. I've been trying to get more of their releases on my shelf, so I pre-ordered that a long time ago, and so it'll be here soon. And then the last thing I noted on here was that we've got a 4K of The Big Heat coming from Hong Kong Cinema Classics, Shout Factory's line of remastered Hong Kong films.
And there's just so many in that treasure trove of movies that they have coming out from that acquisition that I don't know about. But I did pre-order the Arrow Hardboiled, so that's going to be my first dipping into of these new releases. I'd been waiting for the Arrow releases to start coming because I just kind of prefer the way Arrow does their releases to Shout, and they're going to be releasing all these same movies, so I'm excited to see what they've done, because I've seen Hardboiled and The Killer. I mean, they were thrilling to watch. Again, any way you can see these movies is good, but The Killer especially looked really awful on some DVD that Scarecrow had. So I'm excited to see what especially the way with what Arrow, the way Arrow presents the movies, the way that they get their movies onto a disc. They just do such a great job. So I'm excited to revisit some of these ones on these 4Ks. Yeah.
In terms of some purchases that I've gotten recently, I went through some duplicate discs that I had, some 4Ks I wanted to get rid of, and I sold some of those at a local like entertainment resale store, and I got enough credit for me to get the Arrow video Enter the Video Store Empire of Screams box set. This was mentioned in an email on our first episode by our friend Mike Scott, who shouted this one out for being a 5-movie set, lots of 80s underrated gems. And so I had my eye on it for a long time, and I knew once I had enough to trade in and make the cost a little less, I was going to get this box set. So I'm excited to check it out. Haven't seen any of these ones in the box.
Yeah, I've got that one, and I've seen several. They're lots of fun. It's a fun box, so I think you're going to have a great time with it. It would be fun to definitely talk about at least one of those movies on here sometime.
For sure. We are now at the bottom of the hour of today's episode, which means it's time for us to discuss my blind buy pick for the episode, Wild at Heart, a film by David Lynch, released in 1990. The logline is: young lovers Sailor and Lula hit the road to start a new life together away from the wrath of Lula's deranged, disapproving mother, who has hired a team of hitmen to cut the lovers' surreal honeymoon short. This movie stars Nicolas Cage as Sailor and Laura Dern as Lula, and then Laura Dern's real-life mother, Diane Ladd, as her character's mother, Marietta. This also stars Willem Dafoe, J.E. Freeman, Isabella Rossellini, and Harry Dean Stanton, among other familiar faces that you might recognize if you've seen Twin Peaks or any of Lynch's other works. They pop up throughout this film.
Yeah, so Josh, why was this a blind buy for you?
This was a blind buy for me because I want to own all of David Lynch's movies. And this is one of the few that hasn't really gotten the boutique kind of treatment, like either from Criterion or Arrow or something along those lines. This is a Shout Select Blu-ray release, so it does come with several bonus features, but really no essays or inserts or posters or anything fun like that. But it is, as of right now, the highest quality way to collect this film on physical media. So that's the main reason it was a blind buy for me, just being a fan of Lynch's work and having thought a lot about his impact on the types of movies that I like and the types of movies that I seek out, especially over the last year since his passing. And I had been saving it for this long because it's the last movie of his that I had yet to watch. Had you seen this movie before?
I've seen this movie. This was maybe about a year into me getting into Letterboxd and really starting hitting movies big time again. May 2019, as you mentioned earlier, you're a new dad. My son was born in October 2018, so this was sort of like right toward the end of my parental leave when I was watching several movies a day, and at least one of those would be very late at night when I was waiting up to feed him, and I was often half asleep. So there's a whole slew of movies that I've logged and supposedly watched, but as you're learning, I'm sure I was half conscious for many of them. So some of them might circle back around, and I might talk about them again as if I haven't watched them. And honestly, this may have been.
Yeah.
This is almost one of those movies because, especially with the type of movie this is, it is already playing in the realm of dreams and nightmare, and the sort of the veil between dream and real life and how thin that is. So there are things from this movie
Yeah.
that I didn't remember at all. And even if I had been awake for the whole thing, I might not have, because that's just kind of like one of the interesting things about his films generally. And I think especially starting around this time with Wild at Heart, I feel like he sort of got into a groove that he would stay in for the rest of his career between this and working on
Yeah.
Twin Peaks. So he was kind of getting at something that he had obviously been preoccupied a bit with, just from Eraserhead, but then after that things kind of got slightly more conventional for him, at least. But I feel like with Wild at Heart, he started thinking about how he could explore the surreal in ways that that would push the boundaries of what you could do in a studio film, at least in a conventionally released film.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had seen it
Yeah.
before and was very happy to revisit and think more about some of what it all means.
And when you're talking about a Lynch movie, you can try your hardest to get at what it all means, but you're gonna fail, to be quite
Oh,
honest.
absolutely. And that's not even really the way I think about his movies, especially.
Yeah.
I revisited Mulholland Drive not long after he died, and that was only the second time I had seen it. And I just felt, having just seen a lot more movies and more of his films since then, I felt more comfortable with just sort of sitting down with it and letting
Yeah.
it sort of wash over me and not really preoccupying myself with like, what is
Mm-hmm.
the meaning? Even though this movie is maybe a little more straightforward than certainly
Yeah.
than some of what he would do later, but just sort of letting some of the stranger images just be exactly that, just images that flash by and kind of leave a strange
Mm-hmm.
impression, rather than trying to think about what is the symbolism, even though there's obviously he's playing pretty heavily with some very, when you think of the history of film and pop art, with the Elvis stuff and the Wizard of Oz, he obviously is picking things that are standing in for something, at least with some of the elements of the movie. And some of the other stuff is just very, very bizarre.
Yeah, we'll get into it. I definitely feel what you're saying about, maybe watching this while sleep deprived, because that's exactly what I did. I was like, how am I going to talk about this movie like coherently? Especially because now I'm on my like fourth caffeinated drink of the day, and it's late at night as we're recording. So let's just see what happens. Let's get into it. So my first thought during the action-packed opening of this film is that it was very unlike Lynch to open a movie in this way. The way that this movie starts with like the heavy electric guitar and the very violent like punch out where Sailor is attacking the guy who Lula's mother has sent to kill him, and kind of like curb stomping him on the stairs and all of that. It was such a brutal opening, and I thought that was very unlike anything that he had done in the past. But I definitely welcomed it. It was a jolt to the system. I thought it was a great way to open the film.
Yeah, and it's kind of a very. I have to go back and maybe try to rewatch all the opening scenes of his films, but it was very much in media res. Like struck me like more so than his other films. Like it just it begins and like it's there's Nicolas Cage walking down the steps with Laura Dern, and he encounters somebody, and we don't really know anything about him yet other than he's wearing a snakeskin jacket. And before long we hear that he is basically doing an Elvis impersonation for this entire film. Yeah, no, it's a very striking opening.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I was right in finding that that Cage asked Lynch if he could wear the snakeskin jacket in the film, so he just incorporated it into the script. That's such a Cage move.
Was one of the that was one of the features I watched. There was basically a little short where he was talking about how he found that some years before in a thrift store in Los Angeles, and it reminded him of whatever Brando was wearing in The Fugitive Kind, and then he just felt like it was right. He kind of said he wanted a symbol, like it was kind of again reaching back to that like 1950s pop art stuff. He was kind of thinking of the red jacket that James Dean wore in Rebel Without a Cause. Like this is just going to be a thing that you associate with with this character Sailor, and that was sort of like what Cage was inspired by. That's one of the things I love about Nicolas Cage, that he just is such a lover of movies, and that has a
Yeah.
real respect and love for the, this sort of grand tradition. And it's pretty cool that he sort of sees himself as, I'm gonna pay respect to these great artists in this film, and I'm working with one of the greats.
Yeah, and it actually, like, it does kind of go along with the whole point of his character Sailor. The line he says when he gets out of jail and Lula hands him the snakeskin jacket back, he's like, "How many times have I told you this is like the symbol of my individuality, like my personal freedom?" It's just funny that didn't originate from Lynch, because it feels so like embedded in the story, and it flows like really well. And then talking about him kind of doing an Elvis impersonation throughout this whole film, he actually does get to sing two Elvis numbers during the film. The first one, though, takes place in like a club in this kind of typical Lynch dreamscape, where he breaks into song and the girls are clamoring over him, but like not in the normal like way that like a human would. They're like kind of screaming. There's like weird sound effects, uncanny noises, like the lights are everywhere. Just very typical Lynch stuff, but it's super, super effective.
Yeah, yeah, and then the second one at the ending, of course, is, I think, just one of the great Lynch endings of him finally singing the song that Lula has been wanting to hear him sing the whole time. It just kind of puts the button on this being like Lynch's big romantic film. I feel like he was a great lover of genre, whether it was horror or thriller or whatever, and this kind of mixes, like he's doing, there's like lots of melodrama throughout this film, as he was kind of like, I think, concurrent with Twin Peaks, which is sort of like taking those conventions of melodramatic television and really just making them extremely grotesque. He kind of is doing some of the same stuff here with melodrama and romance. And yeah, it's obviously also a very, just like there's a lot of pretty explicit sex scenes, but yeah, they really go for it in this movie, to say the least.
Yeah, and calling this Lynch's big romantic movie is like the perfect way to describe it, I think, because he's on the record as having said that this is like a movie about finding love in hell. And I thought that's a really apt way to describe it too, because these characters are so in love, and the journey that they're taking, kind of mirroring like the Yellow Brick Road from The Wizard of Oz, which is another of Lynch's greatest inspirations, kind of melding all of that with the nightmarish imagery that he is just really great at putting out on screen, like flashing before you and kind of startling you, and it really sticks with you. Like after the final bank robbery at the end of the film, where there's just the shot of the dog running away with the teller's hand. That is really nightmarish stuff, but also extremely funny. The sight of Willem Dafoe's character Bobby Peru in pantyhose with the most grotesque smile I've ever seen, absolute nightmare fuel.
Those crazy
Like,
fake teeth that they have him wearing, which
yes, oh my gosh, these characters are in hell, like in the worst version of unreality that you can think of, and yet they're still able to have that love and that happy ending despite everything that's kind of being thrown at them. So it does have an optimism that is maybe not as present in Lynch's other work, because of how much he focuses on kind of exposing like the darker underbelly of like American popular culture and suburbia and all of that.
Well, when one of the uncanny things that he does here, casting Diane Ladd as Laura Dern's mom, and she is Laura Dern's mom, it's another way that he's sort of like playing with levels of reality here. You sort of bounce back and forth, I guess more so in the beginning, between Sailor and Lula on the run, and then going back to Marietta, her mother's, trying to get these guys to go kill Sailor, because he thinks that she doesn't think he's good enough for her daughter. But you sort of see her relationship with what's his name, Santos. It's almost like this really grotesque parallel of the Sailor Lula relationship.
Yeah.
And it sort of like gives you this vision of like how horribly things could go for Sailor and Lula, but then kind of like with how the movie develops, I feel like by the end it sort of takes this turn where he sort of has this sort of epiphany about what's important to him and love and relationships and stuff. And even at the end of the movie, like the picture of Diane Ladd kind of disappears, like she literally vanishes, almost as if like by the choices that Lula and Sailor make throughout the film sort of like rescue them from damnation, almost like this journey they've been going through, all this horrible stuff that they witness and in some cases participate in. But yeah, and it's sort of, I mean, it's corny, but I think Lynch kind of loves this corny stuff, but it's like the power of love kind of saves them from all that.
And I think that kind of stems from his love of The Wizard of Oz to begin with, because that is, there are parts of that movie that could be considered, corny, because it's all about, there's no place like home. And there's definitely an element of like campiness to this film too.
Oh yeah.
Especially in the Diane Ladd sequences. Like, she is in a full-on soap opera. She is giving like very Betty Davis, classical Hollywood camp, and she's in a totally different movie from everyone else.
When she paints her face with a lipstick was just one of the
Yeah.
most unhinged images I think in any Lynch movie almost. And there's one point early on where that does like a hard cut to her screaming with her face like partly painted.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just some of the characters that she sort of gets involved with on her side of the story, like the way that poor Harry Dean Stanton meets his end with the weird Grace Zabriskie character. And all that stuff is another example of how like these characters and scenes just sort of drift in and out of focus with no real explanation or development. And it just feels like one of those examples of Lynch sort of picking an idea that came to him and just I'm just going to throw it in there and it's just going to leave this impression, and like I don't really feel the need to kind of explain it because it's just sort of part of this exploring the stream of conscious, almost nightmare, how quickly like a dream can turn into a nightmare, like when you're asleep and having a dream, and it can like it can just be very fluid, going back and forth between these two states.
I feel like we should definitely talk a little bit about the connections to the Wizard of Oz in this film. The homages and the references increase over the course of the film. From there's like a Wicked Witch hallucination that Lula keeps seeing throughout the film, leading up all the way to Cheryl Lee being the Good Witch. That kind of changes Sailor's heart about leaving Lula behind at the end.
Yeah, I think the one of the things that struck me the most at the end when he is singing "Love Me Tender" to her finally at the end, it was almost sort of like the real, like there's no place like home moment for him, sort of like deciding like I'm going to kind of set down roots and be with the woman I love. It was a really neat way to cap it off. I mean, it doesn't make it a musical the way that the Wizard of Oz is a musical, but it sort of adds it that signature musical moment, the way that the Wizard of Oz had so many of those. And of course, I mean, Lula wears a pair of ruby slippers, if you will, that are not. They're sort of like so many other things in this movie, kind of like the trashy version of, in a way, of the Wizard of Oz. She's got these sort of like really cheap red slippers that she even tries to, in like one of the most terrifying scenes of the movie, when Willem Dafoe comes and visits her, she tries to like click her heels and kind of escape from this terrible situation. Have you seen Lynch Oz, that documentary that I think Criterion put out as a Janus Premieres? I think it was a Janus Premieres release.
Yeah, it's been on my radar for a long time since it came out, and I have not seen it yet. But just knowing like how much he kind of falls back on his love for that movie and how much it has influenced his entire career, I find it really striking that he references it so clearly, like in this movie. He's kind of using the Wizard of Oz references as like a familiarity, like reference point for people, almost like a touch point within this nightmare that maybe could bring people out of it back to reality for a second, to be like, oh, I recognize this. You know how like in a dream you see something that you're familiar with and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is just a dream, but like I know this is something in my head. Yeah.
Well, and that's the whole conceit of the Wizard of Oz, is that she wakes up at the end and like how much of this was real, how much of this, but and that's kind of what so many of his movies would be like that going forward. And it's like, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much of it was real. Like you had this experience and you were changed by it, right? As I was saying before, this really feels like where he kind of started down the path. Blue Velvet is very horrific and nightmarish, but it feels, from what I remember, it felt more grounded in the world that it was set in, right? Like there weren't just like quite as many surreal things that would happen that were kind of completely inexplicable even within the reality of the film itself. But from here on out, it seemed like everything was very much like him exploring that dream space. a bit more.
I know Blue Velvet is like famed for the shot of like the white picket fence and then kind of like panning down to the grass and like the severed ear, ruining this perfect image.
But yeah, here you've got all kinds of weird stuff. There's like that. There's a couple times it cuts to that hand that passes over a globe. You know.
Yeah.
Right,
like the
that
glass
just
ball
like,
transition.
yeah, which connotes some sort of like malicious magical person maybe has power over this whole situation or who knows what. There's that guy in the bar that they encounter with a British accent, the old man who sounds like he's sucking helium. You see him,
Yes.
and he's yeah, just little things
What
like that.
was
He kind of,
that?
I don't know, and it's like that character is another example of this strange world that they're walking through that doesn't really make much sense, but they're sort of grounded in their love for each other at the very least.
We haven't even mentioned Crispin Glover's like one scene tour de force moment as Jingle Dell, the guy obsessed with Christmas.
It was like a nightmare within a nightmare, like hearing about him.
Yeah, it took me a second to recognize who that was, but then later on there was maybe more of a close-up and I was like, is that Crispin Glover? Like that, it does track though with the career choices that he's made to choose to do something like a bit part like this that is so just strange and like unexplainable. Definitely fits for him.
Were there any other major bits you wanted to hit as we talk through?
It's worth mentioning that Diane Ladd was nominated for an Oscar for this performance.
It's quite a performance. It's very striking, and she had been around for a long time, so I don't know if it was one of those like, we gotta get Diane Ladd her flowers.
I want to go back and watch the clips that they showed for the supporting actresses for this year because I really want to know if they just picked the scene of her putting like lipstick on her face and screaming into the mirror and putting that next to like the 4 other Oscar bait acting choices. I really hope that's what happened.
Well, and I mean, this won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, right? So I mean, this was it was kind of, I don't know how much now for sure, like that kind of stuff heavily influences like what happens at Oscar time. So I don't know what it was. I have no idea what it was like back then, what the cycle was like, if people went into it sort of with that on their minds. That could have influenced some people's choices, at least when it came time for Oscar.
Could have been. And then really like my last big thing was just how slimy and gross Willem Dafoe is in this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's like technically, I guess, third build, but he doesn't show up until like almost basically like an hour into the movie.
Yeah, I forgot that he was in the movie, even though like I saw his name in the credits until he showed up and I was like, oh, he's finally here.
Yeah, and that kind of kicks off like what plot there is in the Sailor Lula side of the story. Like the sort of final act kicks into gear. He's sort of the devil in this hellscape, the devil among devils, if you will, who offers him this choice. Like, I could get you some cash. But it's kind of funny. Like it was the pitiful amount of money. I think it was like $5,000. Like think of what you could do with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's terrifying, and just totally unhinged. Yeah, I mean, a genuinely as frightening a character, I think, as has been in any of Lynch's movies.
Yeah, for sure. Something else I noticed when Santos calls his his mob connection to kind of arrange the hits on Sailor and then Harry Dean Stanton's character, Johnny Farragut, the guy says to drop a silver dollar for each problem and that they'll get taken care of. And that read very like John Wick to me. Obviously, John Wick was so much later, but like the silver dollar resurfacing later in the film is kind of like the signal that this is the hitman and he's about to do his hit. Like that was a cool little bit that I wanted to call out.
I made note of, I mean, just that sort of the band, the metal band Power Mad, that sort of recurs. They keep dropping these crazy riffs from Power Mad songs. And when Nicolas Cage literally does like a flip out of the car, like when they pull over on the side of the road at one point, and he turns on some Power Mad because she wants him to put on some real music, and he puts on this heavy metal song, and he does a flip out of the car, and it's just like, man, his commitment.
And then I wanted to shout out my favorite line delivery in the film, which is when Diane Ladd's character is looking for Johnny and she gets the note that he's gone buffalo hunting, and her line is, quote, "I've gone buffalo hunting? What the fuck does that mean?" Her line delivery is so incredible. The best line delivery in the film by far, in my opinion. I just had to shout that out.
Yeah, she was great. And Laura Dern also did really, really great work. I think she and Nicolas Cage have amazing chemistry with each other, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen Smooth Talk?
No, I haven't.
Oh, another standout early Dern performance that almost feels like it could have been kind of in the sort of Lynch dark underbelly sort of vein of movies. Yeah, I highly recommend checking that one out. Sort of also makes the case for Treat Williams. There's a sequence in the latter half of the movie with her and Treat Williams that is one of the most just like kind of upsetting and disturbing scenes that I've seen in a movie.
Okay.
That sort of puts it in this sort of realm, and I think that was not too long before this movie. So she was pretty young when that movie came out, so it would have been maybe fresh in some people's minds. Certainly not too long before Blue Velvet. So she already had sort of like an interesting track record of really kind of bold choices, even though she hadn't been at it for too long. And then she would be in Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Nice. I'm adding that to my watch list right now. This got a Criterion release, I guess.
Yep. There's a Criterion disc. Yes.
Very cool. All right. I will check that out for sure. How much time do you think that Laura Dern and Nicolas Cage spent just filming in the car? Because they keep getting cut back to just like driving down the road throughout the film, and it's just something I thought was like, there's got to be hours and hours of footage of them just chilling in the car as their characters.
Probably a lot. Which if we're gonna get whenever we get to the release itself, I didn't watch all the extra scenes because there's over an hour of extra stuff.
Yeah, and I think some of that stuff made its way onto the Shout Factory Blu-ray as well, because it's got the hour of deleted scenes. It's got an original making of segment from 1990, which I watched. So I imagine that probably was on the DVD release as well.
Yeah. So, and what I actually ended up renting was Scarecrow sort of made it look like it was a release of Wild at Heart, but what they did for this was they had the Shout Blu-ray, and they had an original DVD, but then they had this thing which they advertised at the bottom, includes the David Lynch mystery DVD. So what they did was they took the Wild at Heart DVD and the mystery DVD from this set that was released in 2008 by Lynch's company Absurda, this green box set. And so it's the Wild at Heart disc from that, plus the mystery DVD, which includes, so now the big reveal of what was on the the David Lynch mystery disc. It included an intro from him for the release, but also all the deleted scenes from Wild at Heart. So it's like, well over an hour of stuff. And I watched maybe the first 10 minutes of scenes, and it was kind of a lot more just like strange interstitials, definitely more of them in the car. For sure. So there may have been some more, there's definitely some more like expanded sex scenes between them later, at least one or two. And then beyond that, on the mystery DVD, you also had, I think the whole run, it's not really a run, but like Rabbits in its entirety is in there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Rabbits is on there, which for 2008, this would have been, maybe you could have found it on this was like, YouTube was not all that big yet. I mean, I think it would have been hard for anyone to see Rabbits. So Rabbits was this sort of like very surreal short that David Lynch made that is sort of like, I don't know, a send-up of sitcoms, but not really. It's like these three characters who are anthropomorphic rabbits are in a room, and they have this series of very disconnected conversations, and sometimes there are laugh tracks at things that aren't funny. And I had I had only seen the bits that were included in Inland Empire, or whatever they took from that to put into Inland Empire. So Rabbits is on there, and then a whole bunch of, or a handful of his short films from earlier in his career. Something that played at Cannes, this strange thing that he did called Out Yonder, which is him and another actor sitting in front of a building, and it's sort of filmed in black and white, and it looks very old timey. And he's kind of talking with a high pitched voice, and he says, "I bees being sitting out here," and everything they say, it's "I bees being," and they do some amateur dentistry. So yeah, a lot of yeah. So this mystery disc would have been a really neat feature in that box set, to just get some of those. I mean, Lynch made so many short films, so this is really just, I think, a snippet of what he did in his career, but it sort of like shows you some of the things that he was getting into that were sort of like, the stuff that was for him, just the weird stuff that he maybe felt like he couldn't even work into a feature that was that. So yeah, I think this is out of print and very expensive, but for anyone who would have picked it up before the real heyday of the box set now, I would say would have been a real treasure for people to have.
Yeah. I know a lot of Lynch's early works and like short films and stuff were uploaded to his YouTube page over COVID. So I feel like a lot of the stuff that you're describing on the disc is stuff that I have seen just because I had subscribed to the channel, to get like David Lynch's weather reports and his random number videos and stuff during COVID. But yeah, definitely at the time that would have been a crazy treasure trove of stuff that most people probably would have never seen. Especially rabbits. That is such a cool find to have on that disc. I saw rabbits on YouTube, and I watched every episode there before I had seen Inland Empire. So when the rabbit scenes showed up in Inland Empire during my first viewing, I was like, oh, hey, like trying to work out how that connected, or like, were they taking scenes from the series in this? How did they relate? And I really tied my brain into knots over that. And that was kind of my first realization that like, that you don't gotta do that. Yeah. You don't gotta do that.
I mean, the first time I saw it was, I saw Inland Empire in a theater. And that was the first Lynch, and I guess really the only Lynch movie I've seen in a theater when it came out, and I had no idea what it was. So it was probably a similar experience, and I was completely confused, like, what is even happening right now?
Yeah. Yeah, I got to see Inland Empire in theaters last year. I drove to Dallas and took a friend of mine who had never seen a Lynch film before, so that might have been a mistake. But I had a great time. But yeah, it was just a really special experience to see that in theaters, like just to be locked in with Inland Empire, just about as feel bad a movie as you can possibly imagine. In a dark room for 3+ hours, Laura Dern giving just like the rawest of raw performances in that film. Just a great time. I loved it so much.
That's great.
And then since then, I got to see Mulholland Drive in theaters as well.
Nice. The Wild at Heart DVD from the Green Box also included the longer sort of proper making of for Wild at Heart, which I did not watch. Did you see any of that? Or did you watch that? Did you have any takeaways from that were interesting or notable?
Yeah, I did. I did have the making of on after I watched the movie, and my biggest takeaway there was, Nicolas Cage talking about the pleasure of working with David Lynch and kind of the vibe that he put out on set, which basically aligns with, everything that you've ever heard Kyle MacLachlan or Laura Dern or Cheryl Lee say about David Lynch and how he runs things. The other big takeaway from there is just Lynch talking about how, like, in life, you never know what's coming up next. So film should kind of make space for that as well, like for all the things that could possibly happen. And so I feel like that's kind of exactly what happens in Wild at Heart and even his later films, anything could happen in life. So that's going to be reflected in his films. And maybe that's kind of why a lot of his stuff comes off as so nightmarish in the first place, because the things that happen are things that could happen, I guess, maybe in real life, but wouldn't be the things that you would expect to possibly happen in reality. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the making of. And then the other bonus feature I watched that was included in the Shout Blu-ray was called David Lynch on the DVD Process. which was basically him talking about how they mastered Wild at Heart for DVD release after they had already locked in like the color grading and all of that stuff on the theatrical print. And basically he was talking about how they were having trouble getting the color timing and correcting right for the night scenes of Wild at Heart for the DVD release. And MGM shelled out the cost to have a new positive struck so that they could start from scratch on the color timing for the DVD release, which I feel like didn't happen often. But back then, for the studio to shell out that kind of money for one of David Lynch's films, who hasn't always been the most commercially successful director, definitely says something about what the studio thought about this movie.
That's cool. Similarly, I saw just a quick remembrance. I think it was him going back between him and the sound designer, and it was for when they took the film to Cannes. And I guess every filmmaker who brings a film to Cannes, they get to basically go almost do a sound check at the main theater where they show the films to make sure that everything is dialed in to how the filmmaker wants their film presented there. Mm-hmm. And it was really cool to hear him talk about how, because you think of David Lynch like, oh, he doesn't really care about awards and stuff, but even he really felt the power of like all the history that was like of movies that had been shown there by Fellini and all these other people who he, held in such high regard. So it was cool to see him sort of captivated by the power of movies and seeing it on like this, what at the time had to be probably the best place you could see a movie. But after, Dune and how that was sort of taken away from him in some ways, and it wasn't, he kind of disavowed it. It was neat to see him feel like he was sort of back in a way with this movie, perhaps. Oh, and the other one was he talked about how after they screened it there at Cannes, the author of the book because this is based on a book, based on a novel, and he asked the novelist hadn't seen it yet until they watched it at Cannes, and he said, after we watched it, I want you to give me one word to describe it, what the experience was like. And they watched the movie at Cannes, and he said, how about I give you two? And the two words he gave David Lynch were not boring, which I feel like is really, that's it. It's not boring.
Yeah. Well, apparently Lynch changed the ending of the book. At the end of the book, Sailor and Lula don't run off together after all. So I feel like that was a big change that I'm not sure the novelist was necessarily expecting at the time. But there is a new interview with Barry Gifford, the novelist, on the Shout Blu-ray.
Nice.
I didn't get a chance to check it out, but I'll have to take a look at it and see. I'm sure he has positive things to say, or else they wouldn't have included it on this release. But yeah, there's that. And then the last thing that I watched features-wise was the uncensored Bobby Peru death scene, because apparently the MPAA was a little hesitant to release this with the R rating because of the scene where Bobby Peru shoots his head off after getting shot by a police officer. And so they added some smoke to that scene in the theatrical release to obscure the gore, and so there was the uncensored version of that on the Blu-ray, which is, it's like 30 seconds long, and it's pretty much what you would expect, and very tame by today's standards. But hey, it's a bonus. It's on the release. It was fun to watch.
There you go. So what do you think? Is this a keeper for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'll be honest, this would have been a keeper even if I didn't like the film, because
Sure.
I want to own all of Lynch's work. So, but no, I do. I really enjoyed this. In terms of where this falls in my ranking of Lynch's films, I would say it's in the mid tier, I think, for me. Top tier, if you're counting Twin Peaks, that's my number one, especially The Return. But if you're not, Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire are definitely tied for the top spot for me. So then we've got like Fire Walk with Me and Lost Highway as the rung like directly under that. And so I think Wild at Heart falls a little bit below those. Wild at Heart and Blue Velvet on like a tier right beneath those two. I do love The Elephant Man. It's just not the one that I go back to revisit often. And frankly, I'm afraid to revisit Eraserhead now.
Yes, especially now. Yes.
So I don't think I'll be doing that anytime soon. And then Dune does make the bottom of the list. Just for obvious reasons. So Wild at Heart does slot itself right into the middle of my list.
There you go. If this had not been a rental for me, yeah, it'd be a keeper, and I'll probably it's destined for a 4K at some point. So I'm probably waiting. I think he kind of wanted everything to be out in Criterion. I think it was before Lost Highway got released on Criterion. I think another label in some other region put it out, and he was like not happy about it. I remember hearing about that. So I think this might be destined for like if the rights lapse at some point. There'll be a Criterion 4K, so I'll probably wait for that. But yeah, it's, I guess if I'm ranking which one, the one that I have yet to see, I still need to see Fire Walk with Me. So once I see that, I think I'm kind of similarly, like Satoshi Kon is another one who I'm like a filmmaker who's gone, who I'm kind of like holding on to that last movie.
Yeah.
So I've got that. I've got Fire Walk with Me, but once I watch that, I can do my definitive ranking on Letterboxd. But they're all amazing in their own ways. I even like Dune was the first Lynch. My dad showed me Dune when I was a kid, so I have a very, very soft spot for that. But I think he could make any movie. He could do anything. I mean, he was like he truly was an artist, and he chose to do things his way. And I think even if you look at something like when he made The Straight Story, right? Like kind of before that was like the last thing he did before Mulholland Drive, I think, and he could make a conventional movie, and if he wanted to, he just chose not to. So yeah, it would be toward the bottom of the middle for me, I guess, but they're all wonderful and interesting. So
yeah, I forgot to mention The Straight Story in my ranking. I think Wild at Heart and Straight Story fall kind of on the same tier. I did get recently, I think it was an Italian 4K of Straight Story, because it really hasn't seen a proper release in the U.S.
There's one coming.
But there is one coming?
There's one coming soon. Yep. So.
Well, then I got the Italian 4K for nothing. It's whatever. I'll hang on to it. But yeah, that one's a great one. Kind of unexpected in his filmography, but I enjoyed it a lot.
There you go. And I think we have some thoughts on Wild at Heart from one of our friends who sent a voicemail in, right?
Yes, we got a voicemail from Conan Neutron, co-host of the Movie Night Extravaganza podcast, great friend from the VHS Village Discord. And let's see what he has to say.
Hello, gentlemen. Your old pal rocker, Conan Neutron here, of many things inclusive of the Movie Night Extravaganza podcast. Here to tell you that you're doing a great job. I'm really enjoying the show. This is a niche that there are not many shows that I find compelling for. And you guys are doing a fantastic job of bringing your love to the physical media world in an inviting and entertaining way. Very excited for Wild at Heart, a movie I have a long and complicated relationship with. I always kind of felt it was a bit uneven, but compelling. And I've really grown to love over the years. David Lynch being one of my favorite directors of all time. It's David Lynch's madcap version of Bonnie and Clyde, right? And I think you get great performances from Cage, Defoe, Dern, Diane Ladd. And it's a great road film. Weirdly, I think it's one of the most fun of David Lynch's movies, even though there are things like Bobby Peru that are horrifying and deeply jarring and violent. I have to say, haven't thought about it in a long time, so I'm excited to hear you guys' take on it. And just know that you have a subscriber and a listener and a friend in me, Conan Neutron. This whole podcast, Wild at Heart and weird on top.
There we go. Conan with another signature line that we didn't talk about from the movie. Yeah. Conan also of Conan Neutron and the Secret Friends. Conan is a touring musician. And I mean, this is also like, again, sort of like Lynch's musical. So yeah, and the Bonnie and Clyde, that's another connection that we didn't tease out, but another one that I'm sure Lynch may very well have been thinking of, the lovers on the run. Yeah.
Yeah, with that and the shootout at the end for sure. And I think he's right saying that this is maybe one of Lynch's like messier films, not not in the sense that like it doesn't make sense, because it's not gonna all make sense, but you get the sense maybe that there's a little bit of messiness in the editing that kind of stuck out to me, like especially when they cut back to Diane Ladd screaming for like 3 seconds or whatever, and then cut back to the action, and then never reference that again. I don't know. It works for me, but I think it definitely could stand out in the wrong way to some.
Yeah, that's why I think for me it sticks out as like I've come to think of this the triptych of films as being like this, Lost Highway, and then Mulholland Drive, which with Mulholland Drive is sort of like the apex of what of him experimenting with these like just strange images and dancing between narrative stuff. And then Inland Empire is maybe him dialing it up a little past what most people would, I've seen it the one time. I almost want to kind of crystallize that experience in amber. Like, I don't know if I want to go back. Like, it was amazing
That's
to
fair.
see once and just have it live in my brain as this series of strange images. But yeah. Thanks so much for the voicemail.
Yes,
Conan.
thank you.
I appreciate it.
All right, I think that just about wraps things up for this week, which means it is time for Jesse to reveal his pick for our next episode. Jesse, what are you choosing for us to watch?
I have 2 discs in front of me that I pulled because I waited until sort of the last minute to make a choice, and I couldn't make a choice. But with what we talked about, I think I have to pick this one. And my pick is from 1978, director Sidney Lumet, The Wiz.
Oh, yes.
So this one, I have seen bits of this on television from when I was a child. I don't think I ever saw it all the way through, and certainly not with what Criterion. So this is going to be the Criterion 4K that just got released within the last few months. We're heading into February. We got it, and we just have there's all the Oz connections. So yeah, it's The Wiz.
Yeah, this is a great pick. I also don't think I've seen this all the way through, but I did pick up the Criterion 4K. The most vivid memory I have of this film was not paying attention to it in like 6th grade art class or whatever. So definitely looking forward to revisiting this and like actually paying attention to it this time. All right, you heard it here first, folks. Our next episode is going to be Sidney Lumet's The Wiz. If you have any thoughts on The Wiz, Wild at Heart, any of our previous episodes, or just want to say hi, you can send us an email or voice message to blindbuyspod@gmail.com, and we'll read it or listen to it here on the air. All right. With that being said, we will sign off and see you guys next episode.
Bye, everybody.